Hey, it's Hobbies Fishing, and what makes a fishing rod the best fishing rod? To answer that, I'm so excited today to kick off my Fishing Rod Masterclass. We're gonna go into every single part of a fishing rod, from the materials, the components, the physics of a fishing rod, to help you get a better understanding of what makes the best fishing rod for you. So take a seat. Please open your textbooks to chapter 1. We're going back to the basics. Today, we're doing a deep dive into the power, the action, and the length of your rod, and looking at the beautiful but complex dance between these three aspects that make the best fishing rod for you. And in preparation for this video, to get the best knowledge to give to you about fishing rods, I partnered with Witch Doctor Tackle. Let me get the sticker. Witch Doctor Tackle is a fishing rod company based out of West Palm Beach, Florida. And not only do they make super high quality fishing rods for freshwater and saltwater, but also they make very thoughtful fishing rods. So every single component is thought out. Every single choice that's made for their fishing rods are thought out for the angler in mind, but also what kind of fishing that angler is going to be doing with that specific rod. And the reason why I partnered with them is that when they reached out to me regarding this idea, they shared the same vision with me about education. From early on in our conversations, they told me that in no way, time or place do they need me or want me to ever say their fishing rods are the best. They truly believe in educating the people that use their fishing rods or any fishing rods, to the point that even in their business, they're not just trying to push rods and sell rods to people. They actually really like when people come to them and ask them, hey, I want to do this style of fishing. What is a good rod for me in that situation? And they will take the time to think about what the kind of fishing scenario they're in, what baits they're using, and offer the best rod that they can for that application. I really wanted to teach you guys, and like I said, they share that vision with me. And they were also super great about sending me like rod tubes that are cut up. I've got reel seats that I can show you, like the insides of. They sent me rod blanks so we can kind of just talk about materials, but also had a lot of great conversations with them. Long, nerdy conversations that I love about fishing rods, the physics, the materials, and really what goes into a fishing rod, so that now I feel like I'm ready to give you the best knowledge that I can about fishing rods. So chapter 1, rod power, action, and length. And the reason why I wanted to start here is, one, I'm going to be using these terms throughout this whole series, so just to make sure we're on the same page. But also, you know, I was thinking about this, when we go to buy a fishing rod, some of the first things that we think about when we take a rod off the shelf is we read that text on the side of the rod that says the rod power, the action, and the length. And in my conversations with Adam and Kyle at Witch Doctor Tackle, I actually learned a lot and learned that I had some misunderstandings myself about rod power and action. So if you're new to fishing and you're just learning what rod power, rod action is, this is going to be a great way to get a really strong understanding. But also if you've been fishing for years and you're a fishing tackle nerd like I am, there's some great little nuggets of information that you can learn too. Now, when it comes to the conversation of rod power, action, and length, you have to understand that these three aspects of your rod are not independent of each other. There's this beautiful and complex dance that kind of mix these three aspects together that can make or break a rod for a specific style of fishing or specific bait that you're fishing with that rod. And this is best illustrated by a quote that Adam gave to me. You want the stiffest rod to hook a fish, the softest rod to fight the fish, and the strongest butt section to bring that fish out of cover. And if that quote is a little confusing, don't worry, it's meant to be. It's supposed to illustrate the difficulty of the physics of catching fish with a fishing rod. So let's start with power. Now, when we talk about a fishing rod's power, the simple definition is the amount of weight or force it takes to fully load that rod without overloading it or breaking it. The heavier a rod, the more weight and force it can take before it's fully loaded, like this. Or a lighter rod will take less weight or force to be fully loaded. And fishing rod power is usually denoted by lightest to heaviest. So there's ultralight, light, medium light, medium, medium heavy, heavy, extra heavy, and then of course you can get like XX heavy or XXX heavy for super heavy rods. Now, when it comes to these power ratings that rods companies give to the rods, they can change from company to company. There is no standardized number for determining power. While they can be denoted the same, will actually vary a little bit. The reason why these are all determined is actually the power that they give to a rod is actually more important to the action, which we'll get into a bit later. So the important thing when it comes to fishing rod power is to understand that a rod company determines a fishing rod's power based on the application that was intended for that rod. So for instance, when we have a medium heavy rod rated for 3/8 ounce to 1/2 ounce lure rating, so the weight of the lure that you're fishing is in that range, that rod will perform as a medium heavy rod because the rod company has determined it so, and it will perform the way that it is intended in that lure rating for that power. Now, if you go over that lure rating, so you decide to throw a 2-ounce bait, right? It's not that the rod is going to explode, but generally what it means is that once you have a bait that's that heavy on your rod, on a rod that's rated for 1/2 ounce, the rod is going to start acting a little differently than it would in that prescribed zone. And then the same is true when you go to the lighter side. If you go too light on your baits, the rod is going to be too stiff and it's going to underperform in that category as a medium heavy rod. So all in all, it's important to understand what that rod was designed for, what kind of baits it was designed for, because you do need to kind of match your fishing, what you're fishing with that rod to that power rating. And that takes us really nicely into the action of the rod. The action of the rod is going to be the most complex, but the most important part of any fishing rod. When it comes to what kind of fishing you're doing, the application, the hook setting of your fish, the ability to fight the fish. This is the most important part when you're looking at rods, is understanding the action and taper of your rod. Now, when we talk about the definition of action, some people confuse this as how stiff or limp a rod is, and that's not necessarily 100% true, because if that was true, then why do we denote or why do we describe action in terms of speed, right? We go extra fast, fast, moderate fast, and moderate, right? Why do we call something that's supposed to be stiff something that's fast? Well, the reason for that being is that the original definition of rod action is when you take a rod and you bend it, right, under load, how quickly it comes back to straight. So if you have a rod like this that will load pretty deep and then you let go, it comes back a little slower than if you have a rod that's a little bit like a faster action like this that bends a little shallower on the same amount of load, and it'll come back to straight a lot faster than this rod will. And that's where we get the extra fast, the fast. And when it comes to fishing, the action of the rod, that kind of snappiness of your rod, is important for when we are talking about working your bait, right? So if we're talking, let's say for jerk baits, something that you want that quick twitching of, right? You want a fast action rod so that you can get those quick, crisp movements. And then for instance, on the other side of that, if we're fishing something like a spinner bait, where it's something that you want the fish to be able to kind of get a good chance to really bite down on that because it's a moving bait before you set the hook. And if you fish that was like a faster rod action, you're gonna rip that bait out of the fish's mouth. So you want a little bit of a slower action so that the rod bends a bit more and gives a bit more time to that fish to bite your bait. And honestly, even for myself, before making these videos, that was my understanding of rod action, right? However, I learned that actually action is becoming more and more of an outdated term. In my conversations with Witch Doctor Adam, who's been making fishing rods his whole life, longer than I've been alive, he was saying, yes, back in the old days, when the only way we could make a fishing rod's action differ was purely on the thickness of our rods, right? A thicker rod would have a faster action because it would be stiffer, and then a softer rod would be thinner because less material, so it's easier to bend. That's when action really made sense. We could really kind of classify rods into fast action, moderate fast action really easily that way. However, now with advancements in rod technology, there are so many things that can affect a rod's action. The way that we wrap the material, the blend of carbon fiber and glass, the way that we layer the materials going down the rod can affect that. Now, it's actually more important to understand the taper of a rod. So now what is taper, right? The taper of a rod is the rod's kind of how quickly or slowly it gets from thin to thick. So like if I take one of these rods, it's thinner here and then it goes thicker. However, it's kind of hard to show you what a taper looks like on a rod on a screen like this. So I made some really nice models for you guys. Yes, they are very rudimentary. I was a hospitality student, not an art student. So if these are our rod tips, right? Let's say we took a magnifying glass and we're looking at our rod tips. This is the tip of the rod that's very thin here. And then all of a sudden it goes to a thicker part right here, right? It transitions quickly to a thicker rod. Whereas on this rod, you have a very slowly gradual kind of thickening of that rod tip. What that means is that this, where it goes from thin to thick quickly, is a fast action taper, because this rod will want to bend higher up in the rod tip right here, where it goes from thin to thick. Whereas something like this, where it's more of a gradual taper, will be your moderate fast action tapers, because that load, how that rod will bend, will be more spread out along the whole rod. Kind of the difference is, if we look at these rods, this is going to be a fast action taper. So when I bend this, you can see from the tip, it's starting to bend right here, right? Pretty high up in that rod tip. And then if we take this rod and we bend the same amount, I can't even really show you on the rod. It's really going, right? It's bending all the way down here. So really the difference is like this rod, we were bending like right here, let's say, and this rod is bending here. You can see the difference on where these rods are bending down. And that's really what determines your action nowadays. So when you're looking at rods, don't think of it as just a bend. You want to think about it as, all right, where is this rod starting to bend? So when we're talking about the action of the rod, there's fast actions and medium actions. And yes, there is a video coming out where I'm going to talk about different applications for a fast action, extra fast action rod, or like a moderate fast action rod. That video is coming, don't worry. But when we're talking about the action, it is no longer just a conversation about how much a rod bends and it comes back how quickly. It is now, with our advancements in technology, we're talking about where that rod is bending, because we can control now how much a rod will bend with our materials. And it's still the same idea, because in our application for fishing, the way that how we want our rods to perform is affected by the taper. And now finally, the rod length. And the rod length is actually kind of similar to the action, where advancements in technology have completely changed the way that we can, like how long or short we can make our rods. Nowadays, when it comes to the discussion of length, one of the most important things to consider is that generally a longer rod will help you cast further because of the physics, right? You know, our arms when we're casting is a hinge. So, you know, like if you ever like seen, like if you ever did that like lever demonstration in like school, right? The longer your lever arm, the more force you have at the end of that lever to release force, and same with rods, right? If you have a longer rod, that force that you can, the amount of force you can put into that bait to send it flying is much more. However, the trade-off is as your rods get longer, your ability to control the rod tip kind of goes down, right? Because it is hard to control something that's so long in front of you. And also please understand is that now that with the way our materials are, we can make shorter rods that can make up for that longer distance in casting with the way we blend our materials as well. So really this conversation of length is going to come down to personal preference and what kind of fishing you're doing. Like if you're fishing from a kayak, generally you want a shorter rod with a shorter butt section, because when you're sitting down in a kayak, if you have a big long rod, it's really hard to control that thing and you're just gonna end up, you know, jamming your rod into your stomach. I prefer shorter rods because I like making short but accurate casts to cover around the bank. That's my style of fishing. So really, when you go to buy a rod, when you're looking at the power and the action, and then you're looking at the length, look for a length that is comfortable for you. So now that we've gone through the power, the action, and the length, I know that is a lot of information. Hopefully you have a better understanding of each of those terms. But now let's bring it back to that quote from Adam from earlier. You want the stiffest rod to hook the fish, the softest rod to fight the fish, and the strongest butt to pull that fish out of cover. Now, this is where we get into that complex dance of these three aspects and how it comes together to make the best rod for your purpose. Now, the best way to kind of illustrate this beautiful dance is kind of one of my favorite jerkbait rods, right? The jerkbait rod itself is a 6'11" medium power, fast action rod. So for jerkbaits, the fast action is great. The fast action taper is great because when we're working a jerkbait, we want to jerk our rod and we want that quick snap to get that jerkbait to make those nice quick cuts that makes a jerkbait so great. However, when I catch a fish... Hi, Hobbyist Editing here. Thank you so much for watching all the way in this video. I'm actually in the process of editing this video right now for you, going over notes of which dog to tackle, and we decided that we needed to save you from the next 2 minutes of me getting too much in my head and overcomplicating facilitating this conversation about rods. So I decided to reinsert myself here to kind of break this down a little bit simpler, just to make sure I'm bringing the best information to you for this Fishing Rod Masterclass. So we were talking about how for the action of the rod, we want that action for like a jerkbait to be fast, so that we can get that nice crisp movement, that nice quick bend of the rod, so that we can get those quick movements out of our jerkbait. Now what happens when we actually hook that fish, right? So we want that action to match the bait that we're using, but also we want a rod that will have a little bit of give, right? So this is like my jerkbait rod. It's a fast action, so it'll bend kind of up here where my hand is. But if I give it more tension, it'll kind of give more, right? And the reason why that's important is that when you go to hook a fish, if your rod doesn't bend at all, stiff like a pool cue, you run the risk of pulling that hook out of that fish's mouth. And I'm sure you felt that before, right? You felt the bite, you go to hook set too hard, and then, oh, there's no fish there. That happens because your rod is not having enough bend. Now, you can get a rod that has some give that will help you with that. Also to know, and we'll kind of go into this when we talk about the applications of these rods, is the line that you're using, right? So braid has no stretch, fluorocarbon has a little stretch, but not too much, and then mono has the most stretch. Now, what does that mean? If we're fishing a rod that's like a slower action and we need a little bit of that kind of non-stretchiness to be able to even set the hook in the first place, then we can fish braid. If we're fishing a rod that's super stiff and it doesn't want to give, we may want to fish mono, because we want to be able to give some of that give back to the fish while we're fighting it. And we can kind of balance things out like that. But all that is to say is that when we're fighting a fish, once we get the action down, we get our bait moving right, and that fish likes it and comes to bite it, we want a rod that has some give to it. So that's what I wanted to say. Back to the video. So now hopefully you have a better understanding about power, action, and length of a rod, and how those three kind of intertwine to make a rod that's super great at a specific style of fishing or a fishing technique. And in this quest to find the best rod, I hope you start to understand that there are no definites. The best rod is a rod that is designed with the right taper, the right power, the right blend of materials, the right length for your specific style of fishing and the techniques that you're fishing with. But you do really want to be able to match a rod to the technique of fishing, but then also it comes down onto the rod maker side to have a really good understanding of what is needed in their rods that they're making to achieve that specific goal. And we'll kind of also go into that more in the next videos with components and the materials. Thank you so much for watching this first episode of the Fishing Rod Masterclass. I know it was a lot of information, so if you have any questions about fishing rods, any questions about anything that I said, please leave them in the comments below. I'm gonna do my best to answer as many questions as I can. I know the guys from Which Doctor Tackle are gonna be in the comments trying to help out with the questions, so we can get a really cool dialogue going on in the comment section. But I'm so excited to finally be able to share this series with you all. There's so much information, so much nerding out that I'm so excited to share. And if you liked what I had to say today, if you learned something new, please leave a like and a follow, share it with your friends. That's really helpful as well. And also for all of you guys that have followed me from TikTok and Instagram and are here now, thank you so much. It means a world to me that you guys are supporting me on this new platform as well. So what are you waiting for? Get out there.